I don't think participation trophy culture was the creation of this. I think ideology was the creation of participation trophy culture. We need to go back to the day where we had standards. And if you were not meeting the standards, you should feel bad that you are not living up to who you should be.
Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believe me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball.
What is up, fam? Thanks for hanging out with us again. Welcome back to the only show that is unfiltered, no bullshit. We don't care about your feelings. This is the pod about all things digital agency ownership, life, and of course, agency sales. I am your host for these glorious 40 minutes of pure audio bliss. Joining me, as always, the man, the myth, the legend, Joey Gilkey. What's up, dude?
What's up, dude? We care about some people's feelings.
It's actually true. I don't know if I can even say that anymore. I feel like
I care less about
soft.
people's feelings. You care about people's feelings probably too much.
I think I've got a problem.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I care about people's feelings, but I only care about people's feelings who I care about them as humans. And if I don't know you, it's hard to really care about you. Or you just need to agree with my ideology, and I'll care more about your opinions and your feelings.
Speaking of ideologies and feelings, I am repping a rainbow
Choose
mug
kindness.
on today's show.
Listen, man, the rainbow's been hijacked by the Lord himself. Or the Lord had it hijacked from him, I should say. Rainbow is a symbol in the Bible, and it got hijacked for cutting dicks off and stuff. Wow, sorry. I thought I'd be more tame on this new version 2.0 of the podcast. Coming in real hot already. Episode 3.
All right, I'm gonna not earmark that one for a social media clip.
There you go.
So, all right, no, for real though. So we were actually talking about this a little bit earlier, and I told you to hold all your punches because I wanted to catch them in real time on this show. I do definitely care way too much about what people think. I think way too much about pretty much everything. So we just had a scenario where we were in a room with a bunch of people. Something wasn't necessarily going the way that I wanted it to go. And I was feeling some kind of way about it. Just I could even dig into what I was feeling. I don't even know exactly what it was yet. But you said I have some thoughts about your current condition.
We'll make it a live.
I want to hear your thoughts.
We'll make it a live counseling session. Well, it's fairly. I would say it's well timed because I just had this conversation with another friend of mine yesterday. I tend to be very candid with my friends because I care about them. I actually had this conversation with a buddy yesterday. So I actually drove to a concert in Nashville. Just two dudes going to a concert together in Nashville. And it was actually great. It was Dermot Kennedy. You know who that is?
I honestly don't know who that is outside of like the 3 times you've mentioned him this week.
He's the greatest singer-songwriter that I know. He's Irish, but his music's fantastic. Anyways. Well, I was driving with a buddy of mine, and he runs a business as well in town, and one of his clients has been a pain in the ass for him. And he shouldn't have taken him on in the first place, and it all started with like they had this contract, and this guy's kind of like got a New Yorker vibe, so he kind of just plays hardball, and so he basically redlines the contract out the gate, just like every line goes line by line, and they go like a month of redlining a contract, and my buddy's just like, dude, I don't need this deal, like I don't really want to continue to do this. I'll put it in front of my attorney and see what we can change, and then they made some changes and put it back in front of the guy, and then he was a pain in the ass again. Anyways, my buddy eventually was just like, hey, I need to probably just have the conversation that needs to be had, and I probably need to fire the guy and all these things. And so he overthinks it a ton, and then he ends up having the conversation. And the guy kind of bullies him around on the call, and it didn't go well. He kind of danced around firing him, and then the guy was just kind of just say what you want to say. And then he ended up telling him like, hey, this isn't going to work out. And so then the call ended, and we were driving to Nashville. Well, he was, he had a physical presence about him that just shifted, and you could tell like he was just in his head thinking the whole time. And he does this quite often. And I just asked him, I was like, is this typically what happens when you have hard conversations? Or he goes, yeah, I just think I think I just get in my head about like I want people to be approve, and I want to be like a problem solver, and I want to, so he has all these good desires, but the good desires then lead to, bigger issues for him. And I just told him, listen, man, like I think I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum, but it doesn't mean
before you say whatever you're about to say.
Yeah.
Is this you giving me advice in the third person as you talk about your friend?
I'm a very strategic individual. Well, yes, I was going to loop it all the way back to the original question, which is how do I apply
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So anyways, what I told him, I was like, listen, man, I think that I think that you have a serious ego problem. And it doesn't look the same as like my ego problem. My ego problem comes off more like confident, arrogant, right? Whereas like I think I'm so good and I'm the center of, so much so that I don't give a shit at all, right? And so there's my ego like pounding my chest. But then there's the other sense of ego where you're also so important to yourself and centralized to your world that you want everyone to approve because you feel like you're kind of like the king of your own world. And therefore, you're just as like you-centered as like someone who comes off more arrogant and cocky like me. It's just, it comes out differently. And so we just talk a little bit more about, like, I think you have an ego problem. Like, I think that you just want to be the center of, and you want to be praised and applauded by all people and make everybody happy, which has a lot of good ramifications and qualities, and it has a lot of negative ones, like, what he's experiencing. Circling it all the way back to you, I think you have an ego problem.
Thanks. Okay.
And it has some of the best qualities about you, which is always what's unique, right? Is, what typically is your strongest quality, there's always the other side of the coin of that quality. And so I think that for you, where it's like you want to like make sure the experience is always amazing for people, you want people to always get their money worth, you want them to feel like they are getting the value exchange out of the relationship or the environment that you've created. That's the amazing side. The downside is that sometimes I think that can almost become an identity for you where I think that you get really uncomfortable when that's not happening. And I think that you, I think that you turn that inwardly. And you feel a certain type of way because you don't want people to look at you like you're letting them down. To some degree. So I think there's probably something there to explore.
No, I mean, I think that I agree with all of that. I also think it's interesting because, there is if something's not going my way or a client's I don't feel like they're getting the experience that they should be getting, or we're not getting the outcomes that we should be getting, or whatever.
Yep.
That's a scenario where I see this, and there is what does it say about me? There's that component.
Totally.
But then there's also where I jump to most often is like, well, they're going to leave. And then it's like, and then somebody else is going to leave. And then it's going to create this mass exodus of clients. And then I'm not going to have a business. And then my wife's not going to have what she needs. Like it's almost this, I think they both happen. I think I'm thinking about myself as way too significant in a lot of situations. I think I also have an unhealthy thought pattern of like, extrapolating it all the way out to like the worst case scenario. Yep. Which the positive of that is it does help me plan. Like, we're going to Tahoe and it could be rainy, so we need an indoor venue. And if the food doesn't show up, we need a food truck. And like I think through a lot of those things, and I want to control those things. But then it also has the negative of thinking all the way through what happens if the company implodes.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of comes back to like I slacked you, when it was happening or when you felt like you were uncomfortable. And I think I said something along the lines of like, you feel things that aren't there. Yep. And you put that pressure on yourself. One is, and I think the other side of that, there's the ego side, which I think we all have and we all wrestle with and we always will. But there's also the, just a general anxiety that tends to come from a feeling of not being able to control the outcome of something, which again, it's a good quality, also has some negative ramifications too. So, I mean, again, it's all good stuff, right? There's a lot of good things to come from it. But I think that this was really helpful. Maybe I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I have, you obviously know this individual very well, but there was someone in San Diego who I never ended up going and working for, but I was looking at working for at one point, straight out of college. And funny enough, my wife worked for him when my wife and I met. And he and I had this like kind of like not falling out, but just like a pretty, you know me, I'll just say how I feel. And I just told him how I felt. And I was kind of an asshole about it. And he was kind of an asshole back. And we kind of like parted ways talking for months. Well, I remember it ended up eating at me. Like, I don't want G to think of me this way. Right. Like, I don't want him to, you know, like we have this long history and I don't want him to do this. I don't, you know, so I end up calling him and talking through with him. I tell him like, man, I just don't want you to, you know, like I apologize for my part in this. Like I've forgiven you. Like, I just don't want you to think this. And he stops me and goes, Joey, I don't want to offend you. And he goes, don't take this the wrong way, but I don't think about you at all. He goes, I have enough things to think about in my life. I have enough responsibilities and people under my stewardship to think about that you're just not that important. And that's not a knock on who you are. It's not a knock on our friendship. He goes, it's just, I don't have time to think about you. But that was like probably the most freeing moment that like one of the like milestones of my life to where I just stopped caring was when I realized that I'm not that important and my actions are not that important to other people outside of like maybe in a very small moment in time. But when you kind of get to that point, you realize like, oh, like people have other shit they're worrying about. And the fact that a meeting didn't start how we wanted to start is probably a very small blip on anyone's day, let alone their week, month, year. And I don't think that outweighs, you know, all the good things either. And so I just don't think that we're as important. And you're definitely not as important as you think you are.
Oh, thank you.
You are to your wife. You are to your kids.
Even
you are to
then,
me.
Probably
You're
not.
important to me.
Die, they'd figure it out. Likewise.
I
appreciate the feedback,
figure
man.
it out. Yeah. And I welcome it back.
I think you're a great person, and I have nothing negative to say.
I could try to think of a few negative things you could think of.
All right, so speaking of your best qualities, you are a man who makes the hot takes.
But what is a man?
You make hot... No, stop. you you make hot cakes and you have hot takes. That should be
That's
wow.
right.
That could be a segment.
I've got big cakes.
Of all of the hot takes that you have made, is there any that you specifically look back on and you're like, oh man, that one was really bad? Like, I was just so far off.
That's great. Well, I mean, yes, historically, I have. There's a funny period of my life where I was pretty liberal. I've always had hot takes, no matter what side of the fence I've been on, and so, yeah, I was not as far as the rainbow crowd at all. But I was a big like what would be considered like the Black Lives Matter type of crew before BLM was a thing. And so I believed in like systemic racism at a mass scale and all those different things. And so I was pretty strong on those opinions. And what's funny about it, and I think that's why I have a unique perspective and why I think I'm right, is because I've been on both sides of the fence, whereas most people are on either they've never been on either side or they've only been on one side. But because I'm a critical thinker and because I'm willing to think and question myself and my own beliefs, I would look back at some of my opinions, dude, that I had that were just like, I hate this word, but they're just like toxic opinions that were almost racist in their own ways. Like, kind of like,
I would ask you for an example, but I'm scared.
Not at all. I mean, like, so an example of like affirmative action, right? Affirmative action basically allows people of color and minorities a little bit easier access to like universities, right? You've got to let a certain amount in, and the bar is lower. It's like, you think that low of my race that you want to lower the bar for me to get in? Like, how does that make let's just take a young black man and say, hey, you got into this school, but all your white counterparts had a higher standard, which means you already know you're lesser than. Like, your race is actually subpar enough to where we have to create a law to let you in at lower standards. So, welcome.
Yeah.
It's not what it's saying, but it is what it's saying. And so I think that's just a a micro example, but I think there's plenty of that. Even like, I won't go any further, but that's kind of where
it's like, wow, you could really go down a rabbit trail here.
I can go down a rabbit trail.
So the overall premise is, the hot take was you were on one side of the political aisle, and
I had a lot of opinions and a lot of conversation. I actually had very persuadable arguments for the other side, which again, I think it makes me a critical thinker because I'm now on the other side of the spectrum. But yeah, I mean, I would have very, very. Here's the thing: when you believe something, there is something called confirmation bias. You can find the answer that you want with data, and because you can make data say one thing and not say another thing purposefully. And you can even think that you're right, but your brain's just basically been trained to find the facts that you want to find and ignore the facts that are not pertinent to your belief system.
So you're saying the fact that you have dug into and explored both sets of arguments maybe precludes you more from some of that confirmation bias than a lot of other people who've only considered one side.
I would say so.
Cool.
Yeah,
interesting.
I would say so.
I like it.
Other hot Are you thinking of any other hot takes in more recent years?
No, I'm just picturing you in ski goggles saying that all sales tech sucks recently on LinkedIn, and I'm like, there have to be.
Am I going to regret this?
Yeah, there's got to be clips like that from 5 years ago that we should look back on and say, wow, that was just a mistake.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I used to have hot takes about like you should automate salespeople out of the sales process. This was when I was running Tribe, and I was running a very there was some not so scalable things about it. But when I was doing outbound for 46 companies, there was an element there of a lot of technology, and so I was very technology heavy. But times have changed. I've gotten smarter and wiser over the years. I see the holistic ramifications of that, not just what you can do in a silo with sales. And I've changed my mind for sure. So you could definitely
what are
find
they?
The
So if you automate salespeople out of the process entirely, like, why won't that work?
I'm not saying it won't, right? Like, that's the good thing about being critical is, like, I think it's contextual to the company, contextual to what you sell and where you sell it to and whom you sell it for and who and what price point you're at and what your desire is for retention and churn and all those types of things, right? So, like, if you have a fairly low ticket price and you have a low margin, well, then you need to find abilities. You need to find things that help you scale because your cost to acquire a customer is so small that it's difficult to get humanoids to actually sell inside of that cost to acquire a customer threshold. So that's what the context is a little bit different. And so I think it just more or less comes down to like case by case. It's very different. And that might be a different hot take, because I think that's something I've really come to learn is that it's not just about, like, it's not cookie cutter. It's not one size fit all. It's not this model versus that model. It's what is best for you based on the data we have available, and or the data we can go find.
Yeah,
that's why our new offer's been crushing. So I think it helps it's that bridge that's always been missing. Yeah.
So the first episode that we did, the relaunch of the Best Damn Agency podcast, this is a few weeks ago. You were talking about, even how you at Apex, at that point, it was still, I think, sales-driven agency, had to reorganize, rethink, re-strategize the way that you build your sales operation. The SDR model that was working for you at one point was no longer working. And now I've seen you actually take this approach with multiple things, with people, with how you structure your teams, with the strategies that you deploy, with the tech that you rely on, and maybe strategy actually gets pulled out, because I think that is the thing that has enabled you to really go this route of, hey, what the team looks like, it could be 5 different things. What tools you use, they could be 5 different. What channels you use, it could be a bunch of different things. We can apply a bunch of different approaches here successfully, but then we really need to start with an in-depth strategy. Am I right in thinking that the hyper focus on strategy, the downline effect has been, hey, let's explore multiple approaches that can be equally as effective?
Well, this has been my biggest conviction as of late, and I'm surprised that it's taken me this long to kind of create this. I'm calling it a totem pole of a value totem pole, and the most valuable is at the top, and it works its way down. And I think what I've learned, because how SDA operated versus how it does now, is we used to basically say, hey, here's the model we build. we come in, we build the process, we build the technology, we hire the sales reps, we bring them in, we train them, and then, we basically hopefully train the client to manage that well, right? Well, we learned the downfalls of that, but the biggest downfall was that even though it's not cookie cutter like perfectly, there was a lot of elements where it was cookie cutter. And it was a lot of the build was based off of assumptions, right? Which is what any person typically goes off of is assumptions, intuition, gut, experience, historicals, whatever. But in our world, stuff changes so much. So here's what I'm getting to is I've actually gotten it down to, I think there's really 6 layers to this value totem pole of like getting sales right. And at the very, very, very top is message market fit. You've got to get the message right that fits with your market, that lands with them, right? The second layer down to what you were saying is strategy. Okay, so do I take a 4-inch dart and throw it at a 30-yard away archery target? Probably not the most effective. Same thing simultaneously. I don't want to take a compact bow into a bar and go shoot it at 7 feet away dartboard, right? And so it really comes down to the message that works, and then the strategy is how do we get that message in front of the market, and then from there it's process. How do we repeatably get that message to the market through this strategy? And then finally it's people. Who, how, where, how much for do we hire? Then it's sales management and leadership, and then it's sales technology. So like in that order is the level of importance. And that message and that strategy on the front end is basically the do not pass go. And I think that the mistake that I've made in the past, the mistake that most people make in the past, is they jump straight to process, people, and tech. They skip management typically, but they go straight for process, people, and tech. They make assumptions, and they go to market, and they spend a bunch of money on tools and on people and on strategy, and they fall short. Or they have success, but not profitable success, or not very profitable success. Whereas what I'd rather do is you spend way less money, identify what is the message market fit, make sure you understand what are the channel viability, what's the viability of each channel, phone, email, social, combining all of them. How do you build your list? How do you segment your lists? Get all the data, prove it out, and then go spend the money on the operation and the people and all that kind of stuff. And that, I think, is the nut that I needed to crack.
I love that. Let's get really in the weeds with that. So for the person listening to this who says, oh man, message market fit, I've never once thought about that as a foundational component of my sales operation.
Yeah.
The exercise then of going and testing that out and pursuing that fit. How do you tactically, practically engage in that process? What do you do?
Well, so what's funny is I have always done this for my business, and this is advice that I give to anyone who I advise or spend any time consulting with, even outside of like working with me. I've always had this thing of like, the market will tell you what works if you go talk to them, right? If you humbly go talk to them and you have some assumptions you want to go test, the market is willing to talk to you. You just got to go find those people, and you got to have those conversations, and you got to get the feedback, and you got to think critically about their feedback, and then make iterations and refining on that every time, right? That's what I always suggest when it comes to like creating a new offer. But even if you have an offer you've always had, and you've grown through inbound, through referrals, through channel partners, through network, whatever, it doesn't mean that messaging, the offer can stay the same. It doesn't mean that messaging that sold those deals where trust is inherently built into it translates to outbound, right? And so that's like you just have to get to that basic belief of like, okay, what worked over here doesn't mean it's going to work over here, right? The offer can stay the same, but the messaging around the offer has to maybe change, because cold audience has no trust. Warm audience has built-in or transferred trust. So the short answer is you have to go talk to the market in that capacity of, I need to go figure it out from an outbound perspective. And so my suggestion is build a list, create the message, make assumptions, go to market, talk to those people, get feedback. If it's positive, it turns into a sales conversation. Awesome. You're onto something. Mm-hmm. If they're not interested, then get some feedback on what would make them interested. Is it timing? Is it something else? Whatever. If they're interested but just not now, like what is it? If it's not me, right? Meaning like, oh, maybe I had who the decision maker is supposed to be wrong. Maybe it's actually this title. Go to market, have those conversations, get the feedback, and then from there, make iterations off that feedback, ask the right questions, and then, call it 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 conversations later, you will have message market fit.
Are there, as you're exploring this strategy of, whittling down what works and trying to hone in on what works, in 2023, there's a bunch of different channels. We've all talked about an omni-channel approach, right?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of different channels you could explore on and that you could leverage in the actual outreach once you've solidified that. In 2023, are there any channels that are just dead and not worth pursuing or not?
No.
From an outbound perspective. Okay.
No, I will say that there are strategies on channels that are dead for sure. Example, cold email. I think that Google has gotten so smart that it will flag you for spam much, much quicker. And so the days of dropping a list of 500 people into a singular campaign with very little variability in those campaign, not going to work. Probably not going to work for very long if it does work at all. And so I think that is a strategy is dying, but it doesn't do anything for the channel. Like at the end of the day, we all consume, right? Like I will always consume content, whether it's video or it's audio or it's written. I will consume it. The same goes for sales. People will always convert on the phone. They'll always convert on email. They'll always convert on social. Now, not everyone will convert on call. Not everyone will convert on email. Not everyone will convert on social. But I think we're starting to get into the world of we have to know how to optimize our list and our market for where they are most likely to convert. So I think that's the biggest thing we have to figure out is, okay, if I want to optimize my sales operation, where is this segment most likely to convert? And then you can optimize from there.
That's great. We won't sit here very long. Have you done much with spin tax or no?
Yeah. Historically, I have.
Okay.
I mean, not right this second, but yeah, I have.
Yeah, I just see a lot of people on LinkedIn, like the way they're trying to skirt the smartness of Google is integrating spin tax more into outbound campaigns so that it's weaving a new, 36 emails instead of one cold email that's going out.
Yep.
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I'm actually getting this code built right now. I'll probably build it into our website. In the semi-near future of basically like, hey, put your email copy into this and it'll spin out for you what's wrong with it. Basically, what's gonna push you into spam more than likely, and what would we change about it?
Yeah, I like that a lot. All right, we are going to talk about the softness of the workforce.
Okay.
Before we talk about the flaccid workforce, I want you, Joey, to tell everybody about Palm Springs.
Oh, okay, fine. Best Damn Agency Mastermind. We do 2 retreats per year, 2 only, and we pour everything that we possibly can into it, including every single dollar that we could take home. To cut some corners, we take home $0.
We lose money.
Okay, JJ and our bookkeeper tell me we lose money on those reserves. So. But that said, the whole goal is to create an experience that if you're going to leave your family, you're going to leave your company and leave your hometown to go be served and to serve others, we want to create the best environment for you to think big, to do big, to come home with big plans. So Palm Springs is our next opportunity. Historically, we go on these retreats and we only let Best Damn Agency Mastermind members come. We might bring a guest or 2 if it's a very strategic guest that we think would provide value to the group and or good partnerships would be there, so on. And so Palm Springs is our next one. It is November 7 through 10, I believe is the date. Palm Springs, California. Yep. It's where they do Coachella. We're actually renting out this entire block of luxury villas. Every house is like 6,000 square feet. Every room has a suite. They all have pools. It's going to be sick. But more importantly, we're also bringing amazing guests. So we have 3 guests, one of which is a nearly 9-figure per year in revenue agency owner. One is a high-performance coach who coaches Olympians, Tiger Woods, massive entrepreneurs you've probably heard of. And then one is more of an integrative medicine, holistic thinker to help you think about, okay, we're taking care of your mind, we're taking care of your money, but we're also going to take care of your body. So this year's a little different. I'll wrap it up here with this. Our members always get first come, first serve. They will get the automatic spot for them. But we are opening up to probably about 7 people. I think that's probably now 5, give or take, but let's just say 7 at the time of recording this in June. And so if you are interested, now you have to fit the criteria. You've got to be a 7-figure or 8-figure agency CEO. You've got to be a male, sorry, females. And you've got to want to grow. But if you are interested in that, JJ, where do they go?
They go to bestdamnmastermind.com/Palm Springs. All one word, Palm Springs. It's going to be awesome.
Dash there.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, that's also in the show
No
notes.
dash.
In YouTube, Spotify,
It is the one,
Apple.
the ones that I have to make, yes.
The ones that
It's
we
gonna be
have to
great.
make. When this goes live, that will be linked up. So anyways, if you're an agency CEO, you are doing between 1 and call it 25 million, and you want to be around other men who are running agencies very, very well and profitably, and you want to learn new things about you and your business and other people who are doing good things, go to bestdamnmastermind.com/Palm Springs. Palm Springs is all one word. Link it up. Okay.
Boom. All right. The flaccid workforce, Joey. That's what I'm calling it these days. So my question, as I watch people engage with your LinkedIn posts, which I appreciate because they've given me just great things to think on and great topics for this podcast.
You got one coming out in 13 minutes.
Oh, I'm excited about that. You've been trying to draw a divide. You've been trying to get people to just, I think, engage with, I would not call them hot takes. I would call them bold takes about sales and market conditions and running a business in 2023. And one of your posts was, you should go home right now and lay off 50% of your sales team because they are the ones who are not getting results and you are the ones who are letting them get away with it, basically. And then I think your next post said, hey, scratch that. It's more like 70%. And the backlash from that was crazy. And you know, the ones that people who would intellectually engage with that, here's why that doesn't work. I know I'm cool with that, but the people who are just like, dude, you're ruthless. You're, I forget, you know, all the comments, right? People
read the room.
Soft. Yeah, read the room, dude.
There's layoffs. Okay. Be empathetic. No.
Why is that where we are? Why are we? If you're not performing, clearly not performing, and people are advocating without even knowing you for you to have the right to work at a company because it's not fair. Sure. How have we gotten here?
Well, I think that we have a very soft ideology that's being played up. I think that we have. I don't think participation trophy culture was the creation of this. I think ideology was the creation of participation trophy culture. And we have gotten to the era where no one's feelings are allowed to get hurt. Nobody, you know, like I heard this on a podcast the other day and I freaking loved it. He basically said, we need to go back to the days of bullying. And what he meant by that, and he explained it more, obviously it's a hot take, controversial take, but what he meant by that was, and maybe I might put a LinkedIn post about that. That's got maybe I should make something about bullying. That'll go well. What we was talking about was we need to go back to the day where we had standards. And if you were not meeting the standards, you should feel bad that you are not living up to who you should be, and who you know what your potential is. And so I think, you know, we just had a guest speaker in the mastermind. He's also going to be with us in Palm Springs, and he said a quote, and I think it was something along the lines of, where was it? I had it written down, but he said something along the lines of, if you turn your back on your talent, then you turn your back on why you're on earth. And I think we've gotten away from that as like, we have been given gifts uniquely. We talk about the law of combinatorics, you know, and Naval talks about the law of combinatorics and how you are uniquely you, and how being uniquely you means that you are a one of one, number one in your category of combinations. And I think we've gotten to the point now where we don't believe that anymore. We believe that everyone should be equals and we all should just play nicely and all these different things. And so I don't think that we've gotten away from like winners. And I think it stems from an ideology that hates capitalism and hates people. It's the losers who don't like losing who've kind of perpetuated this. So I think that's just bled its way into the sales operation and employees and all that. So
let's talk about it as it particularly applies to sales teams.
Cool.
Right? So I feel like you can hide this. Well, you can hide it pretty well on big teams. You can hide it well on teams that don't know their numbers and don't give shit about data. So don't be those people, but most people
Sure.
are those people. And then you can hide it, I think, better on like accounts teams and delivery teams than you should be able to on sales teams, right? If your only metrics for success are hours worked, billable hours, or client retention, which might, there might be 4 or 5 team members who are really responsible for the results that client's getting. That does not map one-to-one to the sales team where you are a producer and your only goal and job in life, the reason you are being paid is to drive revenue for your company.
Yep.
So you should not be able to hide. So how do you then, as a sales leader or a CEO who has a sales team, how do you create high standards? How do you hold people to high standards? How do you create accountability? And then when and where do you step into like making those hard choices and firing the people who aren't cutting it?
Well, I'll give more a theoretical or like a philosophical, and then I'll give more practical. So philosophically, I think we all, if I walked up to a CEO and he didn't want to fire his sales team, and then I said, okay, yeah, I agree, man, it's fine. Let me ask you this. Let me see your calendar. And then I'll look at his calendar and say, hey, like what on here, like is there a 20% on here that drives like 80% of your results as a CEO? Like, yeah, I was like, yeah, that's the Pareto principle, right? Like, yeah, well, you believe in that, right? Pareto principle? Yeah. Cool. You say that, but you don't. Because now I'm looking at your sales team, and you want to keep everybody when you and I both know there's a smaller portion of this that drives the majority of results. And so you say you believe in the Pareto principle, you say that you live by that, but look at your sales team.
Dude, I've literally never heard that for staffing, and it's the best.
That's my
so
best
good.
take. It's probably the most accurate take because it's a principle that I think we all would agree with. I'm also wickedly good at sales, so I'd basically just turn that entire conversation on its head to that guy who didn't agree with me without telling him, directly that you should fire 80% of your people. So that's the philosophical. But I think that the two practicals, one is I think that you need to have a very stringent, maybe isn't the word, maybe that is the word, I'm not even sure what that means, I just think I know what it means, but you need to have a very specific criteria for how you hire and how you fire. I'll talk more about the firing. So the firing, I think that you need to have a 30, 60, 90 assessment for sales reps, and then after 90 days you need to have a quarterly review, right? Similar to like EOS where they have like people analyzers or whatever. Like you need to have a process for reviewing their attitude, their aptitude, their core value fit, their skill set fit, and all that. But the 30, 60, 90, you need to have very specific criteria they need to be hitting. If they don't hit it, either you put them on a very short PIP and you cut them if they don't make that performance improvement plan come to fruition, or you terminate them immediately. I tend to think if someone's not hitting it in 30 days of what the bar I set for them for 30 days, I fire them. And so you need to become more what people think is ruthless, and what I have tried to now communicate and wave the flag around is it's not ruthless, it's required. That's kind of been my mantra, as we talked about. I don't know if it was last episode or 2 episodes ago. So that's a practical, is you need to put in play 30, 60, 90-day assessments and then quarterly reviews of these people that are also criteria driven. The second very practical, and I know you're probably going to jump in, but let me give the second practical, is you teach that culture by executing on that strategy. You fire people. And you tell the team, here's why they were fired. So that they know, if I don't do what he did, then I have a higher chance of not getting fired. Right? If I perform, if I do the things that are set out before me and the criteria is very laid out for me specifically to be successful, then I just need to do the things that tell me you're going to make me successful. That guy didn't. He got fired. Okay, don't be that guy.
Yeah, and if you've led a team the opposite way for 5 years, you can't just expect it to change overnight. But the only way that it is going to change is you sticking to your guns of what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
I was
just
in a
don't accept
meeting-
mediocrity. Just don't accept mediocrity. If you want to be excellent, can't.
I was in a sales team call, just kind of observing a few days ago, and somebody on our team was checking in on, hey, what were your goals for last month and how did you do? And this is a new client. He's saying, hey, this is not necessarily an accountability check. I just want to get a gauge for from on my end, how we think about these things. And 3 people of the 5 were like, my goal was 6 and I got 4. My goal was 10 and I did this. My goal was 200 activities and I did 150, you know? And this is what pissed me off. I was viscerally like, I was upset to the point where when we got off the call, I was like, dude, this is your client. I can't I'm not going to jump in. And, but I had to tell him I was bubbling up and I'm like, dude, the look on their faces when they told their numbers and basically just admitted to their failure. It's what it is. It's failure. They didn't hit their goal. It pissed me off, man. And it made me reflect a little bit too, where I'm like, oh, I'm sure there's a lot of areas in my life where I've set goals that I'm not dogmatically sticking to, and I'm not like holding myself accountable. So I need to look inside and do that too. But man, sitting as an observer in that room,
Yep.
I want to work on a sales team where there is such a buy-in and a commitment to excellence. You might have said that earlier. Mm-hmm. I want to be like Tim Tebow, dude. I want to, when he lost that game, the beginning of 2008, and he sat down at that post-game interview.
This will never happen again.
Through tears, you will not see another player play as hard as I do for the rest of the season. They went on to win a national championship. I want a sales team that thinks that way.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think you have to be ruthless around who you hire and how you set them up culturally. So I think that a lot of people just kind of like have this glazed over, I'm punching in, punching out. I heard that I can make good money in sales. Oh, I'm not making as much as I thought I could, but it's good money. I might as well just do this until I get kicked out or until a better opportunity comes. I think we've created, so one there, back to your original question, I think the ideology has shifted quite a bit, but I think that also we have coddled people and we've patted them with, and this is why I'm kind of shitting on, on LinkedIn, like the whole sales tech stack obsession with sales tools and is like, you guys just don't get it, right? Like you are creating a culture where you are telling the sales rep that you are not that good and I have to give you all this shit for you to be successful. And then they think that they can't be successful unless they have all the shit. And so for me, I'm like, I just have no interest in giving you a crutch for you to, like, it just doesn't serve you as a sales rep. And it sure as hell doesn't serve me as the investor in you. Like that's how I'm starting to look at myself with when I come to hiring is, I'm not a charity anymore. I think that I hired a lot of people on potential at one point. I think I hired a lot of people on culture fit and what could be. And now I'm starting to look at it as like, no, like I'm an investor. I happen to have a CEO title, but I'm an investor in my team. And if I wouldn't put money in this asset, if I wouldn't pay their retainer, to kind of go back to what we talked about last week, if I wouldn't pay the retainer, then it's a full stop no. Like there's no like, oh, well, there's potential. Like there's an amazing guy right now who he's an amazing culture fit. He's got a very strong like North Star compass, from a convictions, ethics, and core values perspective. He's really sharp when it comes to sales in a lot of ways, but he's really sharp in a specific category of sales that does not necessarily mean that he will translate well to our category of sales, right? He's very solid in like B2C, online marketing, inbound marketing sales, not so much outbound, hardcore, high value B2B. And he checks every box except for he's got the proof that he can operate in this specific environment. And I have to ruthlessly just be like, as much as I love the guy and I would love to bring him on the team, I have to say no. You can't. It's too much of a gamble for me to not just get people that have the ability now.
Yeah, my dad, his best friend, ran like small business sales for ADP for 10 years and is one of the most competitive, sharp individuals that I have ever met.
Yep.
And his saying was, everybody's, and he would say everybody's name is their stock symbol, and their stock's either going up or down. And my question is, like, am I investing or not?
I love that.
That's pretty good.
That's really good.
It's pretty good. So my dad, who's my number one cheerleader and very rarely has anything negative to say about me, sometimes maybe he should be more critical, I don't know, but he'll call me up like on random occasions, and he's like, I'm buying that JJ Russell stock today.
Is that what he said?
All right, man.
That's the best.
I appreciate that.
That's great. You need those cheerleaders.
I know. He pumps me up. My Abigail's always like, hey, like, I'm frustrated right now, and I'm just going to tell you how it is. So if you need somebody to blow smoke up your ass, call your dad.
Thanks, babe. Okay.
And apparently I can call you if I need somebody to level set me. You can tell me parables about your friends on your
I'm bullish on your stock ticker.
Trip. I know you are. All right. Let's end with this in our last 5-ish minutes.
Let's do it.
It might take longer than that. Oh man, it's such a good topic. We'll see what happens.
Let's do it. I don't have a call. I have a call in 15 minutes, so we're good.
Me too. All right. So a lot has changed for you. A lot's changed for the clients we serve, the industries that we serve in the last 5 years.
Yep.
You've been doing the sales thing for 12 years, right? So you've seen a lot. Over that span of time, what would you consider the fluff, the seasonal, the things that change, and pull out, like, what are the time-tested truths of sales, the principles that will never change? And we've talked around some of them in this conversation, but just to lay them out, what are the core tenets of successful sales, teams, operations, whatever, selling for a company that will never change?
Let's see. In no particular order, although usually if it comes to mind, it's probably in a particular order. But in no particular order, I would say applicably to the conversation that we just had with Dr. Jeff Spencer recently. Mindset. I think if you have a weak mindset team, a weak mindset people, a weak mindset leader, a weak mindset CEO that is over top of all this, then you will go as far as your mind has allowed you to go. Right? Again, it goes back to the man who thinks he can, the man who thinks he can't are both right. And so if there's a sales rep who thinks that they can only make 100,000, 150,000, I mean, let's go back to, when we went up to St. Louis and I sat in front of that 80-person sales floor and I gave a talk. And I basically asked the entire room, who's the highest earner in the room? And they pointed to this one guy. And I asked him how much he was going to make this year. And it was like $350,000 or something. I was like, cool. I was like, why not 700? And I looked over at his sales leader, his VP of sales. I said, is that even possible that he can make that? He said, yeah. I said, why aren't you making 700? And he didn't really have a good answer, right? And so I think a lot of it comes down to, like, what is your mindset and instilling that in sales reps. So that might actually be the highest number one priority. The second, I think, is a culture, like creating a culture of winning and creating a culture of transparency. I think those goes hand in hand. I think that you have to know what's going on and be accountable. You need to have personal accountability and ownership amongst the team, from the CEO all the way down to the lowest level sales person, sales admin, whomever that person might be. There needs to be extreme accountability there to your actions, and there needs to be a standard set for success, and hold yourself there. And then more practically around sales, I think that you need to always be attentive to the market. I think that so many people, get their advice from a podcast, a friend. They look at someone else's business and they try to model it. And they don't look specifically at who are we and who do we serve and how do those two, work together. And then from there, what is the market telling me that they need and how do we best create messaging strategy, process, people, management, and technology to that end. I would say those are probably the top 3 or 4 tenets I can think of.
No, that's really good. What I think we should do, it is good. We should take those macro categories, and next week we should pull them apart a little bit later in the show.
Yeah.
So talking about mindset of a sales team, the transparency and accountability. What was the last one?
Just
know your market.
Basically just being in tune with what the market's telling you they want.
Yeah, I think that's really good because there's I need to focus on these things, and then there's people asking the question, well, how the hell do I actually focus on these things and build an operation where these things exist? So I think that makes a lot of sense, and it makes for a really good conversation for us to dig into.
And notice, none of my answers were technology or even systems and process. I mean, process is on the list for sure. It's just not those top 3, right?
So maybe, though, I'll push back on that. So in your hierarchy, where was management and leadership?
That was 5th.
So that was your first one, though.
What was? No, it was mindset.
Well, mindset. I know mindset is
you're talking about
sales leader.
100% is. Yes. No, I agree. You're right.
I don't know.
I think there's 2 things though. There's one is how do you get outbound success? Like we're talking about specifically a very specific outcome.
Yep.
And then I think there's it's not linear necessarily, but someone has to lead someone through the messaging, and so
yes.
You could argue you're right. Maybe it should be first. Doesn't sound as sexy though.
I like what you have. You make better IP than I do. So, if you want to hear that unpacked next week, if you want the actionable items, you got to show up and hang out with us next Friday for another episode of Sales on the Rocks. I think next week, Joey, we should bring some bourbon back. Like, are you done with your second round of 75 hard?
I'll do it. I'll do some bourbon.
Okay. All right, we'll do some bourbon on
yeah,
the show.
I got
drink with us next week.
Drink. Oh, I'm gonna drink
as always.
Añejo.
Oh,
dude,
yes.
I bought a fucking massive Adictivo. Because that's like the mastermind. Like when we do our retreats, that's the first bottle to get completely bone dry. And I went to the store the other day and I was looking for Añejo and I saw it. And then next to it, I saw the gargantuan version of it. And I was like, sure, $160 sold. And
dude, I walked out. We were in this was Nashville. We were in Nashville about a year ago.
Yep.
For the mastermind retreat, and what's the not Casamigos? What's the one? Clase Azul.
Yep.
So sometimes we'll grab a bottle of Clase Azul. We'll grab some fun stuff that guys like to drink. But they had the 1.75, which is just it's giant glass bottle that goes from my waist up to above my head, and I'm holding this thing, looking like a small child. And I walk to the front desk, and I'm like, "How much does this cost?" And the regular bottle's like, $150. So I'm thinking $300, and it was like $600.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Yeah, I guess just because
that's why you should just drink Adictivo. It's amazing.
Yeah, if they want to sponsor the show, that'd be great. As always, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in, giving us your time and attention. We are grateful for it. We do not take it for granted. Wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, rate, review, subscribe, and check us out on YouTube because Joey is a good-looking man, and his hot takes look even better in person. Subscribe to the show. Leave us a review. We would love to see what you have to say, and we will get back to you. Hang out with us next week for next week's episode of the Best Damn Agency Podcast. Until then,
hot takes, hot cakes.
Double hot cakes.
Whoa. Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believe me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy.